come in to the kitchen, and the kitchen is good sized kitchen. You got a bench here.
If Charles did walk out of this apartment, where did he go?
The closest person to us is missing. I'm thinking that someone just has him and he's somewhere. Like, where is he?
The first time that he ever went to Anna's apartment was the last time he was seen alive.
I remember asking her, like, why are you not freaking out?
There were some red flags that started to pop up.
They were extremely concerned. They thought maybe something terrible happened.
Charles Butler's final moments, that's not a good way to go.
56-year-old Florida businessman Charles Butler has just moved back to his hometown, New York City.
This is really nice. I love this city.
He would always talk about how New York City is the greatest place on earth. I'm Molly Butler. I'm Chuck Butler's oldest daughter. Originally, my dad was from Queens. He lived there till early 20s. And he said that he went to Florida to visit a friend and ended up meeting my mom. They fell in love pretty quickly, and they ended up getting married after a few years and having the three of us.
After Molly, Charles and his wife Kim welcome Margie and Maxwell. As the family grows, Charles's career takes off.
My dad was definitely a businessman. He owned a pizza shop, and he was actually the first pizza place in Central Florida to start delivery pizza. Then he started doing insurance. He opened up his own insurance company. He just, great businessman, great with finances, very, very smart. I'm Margie Bolton, and I'm Chuck Butler's middle daughter.
We're in love with architecture in New York City.
His heart was always back in New York. He was always a city boy through and through, for sure.
While Charles's business is growing, in 1997, his personal life is upended when he and his wife Kim decide to divorce.
And then they just separated. Like, they literally got together to have us three kids. Like, they just weren't really meant to be together. We would visit my dad on Wednesday nights and every other weekend. He would always try to just make the time that we had the best that it could be. He always made everything fun. One of my favorite memories of all time was a New York vacation. We were on the subway, and my dad starts singing, "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life." And he gets out onto the street.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to feel sorry for me, even though I'm down and out.
We were younger at the time. I remember my brother was really embarrassed. Like, "Dad, stop."
My heart's beating.
I'm Maxwell Butler. I am Charles Butler's son and the youngest of three.
Oh my God.
It would be so embarrassing for us, but looking back on it, it was just a good time.
In 2012, Charles encourages his oldest daughter, Molly, to follow her career ambitions.
My dad was all about living your dreams. Find out what you're passionate about and make that your business. So I knew that I wanted to be a New York City hairstylist. That was my dream since I was very, very young.
Charles gives Molly a push by suggesting they become roommates.
When I was 24, my dad and I found an apartment in New York City.
Okay, I'm on 78.
And the deal was, my dad would come up for one weekend out of every month. Well, he was there 3 weeks out of every month.
Charles's part-time residence in New York coincides with another significant turning point.
After he got divorced from my mom, he was never really open to the idea of marriage. But he said, I wanted to find my queen. So he started getting on a bunch of dating websites. He would always make dating websites in New York, even though he lived in Florida.
In the spring, he connects with a woman from Brooklyn named Anna.
My first impression of her was she's super cute. I could totally see why my dad was into her. He was just smitten by her.
I had never seen my dad like that before. He was in puppy love.
On September 15th, Charles comes to town for one of his regular visits with his daughter and new girlfriend.
On his way up, he gets into his first class seat and he's taking selfies like, I worked hard and now I'm gonna go play hard, and I happen to get the seat next to me is empty, so I get the whole row to myself. He was just so excited about it. He said, you know, this is the way the whole trip is gonna be, just blessings everywhere.
Charles makes plans to spend Monday night with just Molly.
We just had the best conversation about, wow, we're living in New York City and I'm a New York City hairstylist. And I was in a very, loving, healthy relationship, and he was in a loving, healthy relationship. We were just reflecting on all of it. I didn't know at the time it was gonna be my last conversation with him, but looking back on it, it was literally the most perfect conversation we could have had. It was just awesome.
The next day, Tuesday, Charles has plans with Anna for a special evening.
Tuesday, he had messaged me and he said, hey, I'm actually gonna go out to Anna's house tonight. We're gonna watch a movie, I'm gonna sleep out there. She lived in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. So this was a big deal that he was going to her house for the very first time.
That night, Charles fills Molly in on the date.
So he was messaging me, oh, it's so sweet, I got a home-cooked meal for the first time in forever. We're having a good time. He's like, I got my cantaloupe for the morning, it's great. She's gonna go to work and then I'll come back home and I'll meet you in the city for lunch tomorrow. I was trying to book one of my flights back to Florida, and for some reason, when I was booking my flight, my credit card wasn't being accepted. So I was asking him, hey, can you buy my flight to Florida? I'll transfer you the money. He said, yeah, absolutely, remind me in the morning.
The next day, when Molly doesn't hear from him, she texts her dad about the tickets.
And he told me, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling good. I had a party. And he called me Honey, which my dad had many nicknames for me, and Honey was never one of them. So it didn't really make sense. So it's just like, okay, please book it. When I left work that day, I went home and my dad wasn't home. And I was trying to call him over and over and over, and his phone was dead. I didn't have her number at this point. I didn't know how to get a hold of her, but I also knew that she was the last person that he was with.
The next day, Molly's concern intensifies.
I started getting calls from his employees at the insurance company down in Florida. And they were asking me, we haven't been able to get a hold of your dad. What's going on?
By Friday night, 3 days since she's heard from her dad, Molly is desperate to make contact with Anna.
I find a way to break into my dad's iPad and find Anna's email. So 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, I get an email back from her finally, and she said, hey Molly, he left my house on Wednesday morning and broke up with me, and I haven't heard from him since. My dad was head over heels in love with her. He had told me that he was already looking at rings. So at this point, I know something's up. I email her back and I said, my dad is officially missing.
We still hadn't heard from him, and we were extremely concerned.
It was just as if he just vanished.
investigators zero in on Charles's final moments.
That was the last footage that we had of Charles. He just vanished the next day.
And the focus falls on a seemingly friendly face.
Have you had the locks changed since this?
Since that, no.
But we didn't know what the role was that she played. That's when I really, really got suspicious.
How does a man who is completely content with his life just go missing? The only thing Charles Butler's family knows is that he went on a date with his new girlfriend, Anna, and then abruptly ended their relationship.
I'm talking to her and I say, what happened? What was going on? She says, we had dinner on Tuesday night. Everything was great. He spent the night. On Wednesday, I went to work.
According to Anna, that morning, Charles stayed in bed in her apartment.
She said that in the morning we were texting each other, and then by the afternoon I was getting texts from him. And then he just broke up with me for no reason. And I said, oh, can I see the text messages? And she goes, no, I deleted all of them already. And I was like, wait, what? Why did you delete the text? And she said, well, because he broke up with me and I was heartbroken and I didn't want anything to remember him by, so I deleted all the texts. I remember asking her, why are you not freaking out? It just felt like she was so disconnected from it, and it just felt weird. I could feel something was off, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I said, I'm gonna call the cops. We need to find my dad. 2 cops showed up. They basically just start taking the information. And I'm telling them every detail that I can give him. His phone was dead for 3 days. I show them the text messages. He was spelling things weird. Certain people will say lowercase okay, and that's how my dad would say it. But this was capital O, period, capital K, period. So just the way that he was texting was weird. It was very obvious that it wasn't him.
I am Christopher Heath. I'm the investigative reporter at WFTV Channel 9 in Orlando, Florida. We covered the disappearance of Charles Butler. NYPD comes in, they look at it. There's no evidence of foul play. There's no tracks saying something suspicious is happening, apart from the fact that nobody's heard from him and the cell phone text messages are a little off-putting. New York City is a giant place, and NYPD have a lot on their plate. They say, we're not throwing up roadblocks and shutting down, the boroughs till we find him, because we just don't have enough here pointing us in that direction.
They kind of were just a bunch of people in the city do this all the time. He's probably just hanging out at the beach, trying to just get away from his life. And I was trying to tell them no, something is happening. This is not okay. This is out of character. One of them, I guess I had pulled on his heartstrings just enough, and he said, listen, I'm gonna put out a report. They're not gonna actively look for your dad, but I'm gonna do what I can and figure something out for you. There's not much that we can do, but I'm gonna do what I can do to help you.
Despite the detective's assurances, Molly's concern is rising.
And I started freaking out at this point. The closest person to us is missing, literally just vanished out of her life with no answers.
He doesn't go off the radar. With his kids, he doesn't ignore us. He doesn't take a day or two, no matter how much he parties. When it comes to his kids, he's always just there. Something just didn't feel right.
After a few days had passed, my sisters told me that they still hadn't heard from him and that they were extremely concerned and that they thought maybe something terrible happened.
Feeling like they have hit a dead end, the Butler children resolve to take matters into their own hands.
We decided that we were gonna have to go the route of a private investigator at this point.
I'm Keith Freeman. I'm a private investigator. I had just come back to Florida from a trip to Central America. I was on my way home when I got the call. I literally turned my car around and booked a flight and went straight up to New York that night.
5 days have passed since anyone has heard from Charles. Freeman begins downloading with Molly.
And I'm telling him all the details. He's like, wow, you did a lot of the legwork for me. Thank you. One of the first things that he had said to me, like, no more contact with Anna whatsoever.
Freeman then digs into the police theory that Charles may have willfully disappeared.
The first step is we check to determine whether Charles had booked a flight through his office, to check his billing records on his credit cards, and found nothing to corroborate the fact that he had made any additional travel plans.
There was no activity anywhere whatsoever. We had all kept trying to call his phone. It was off. We couldn't get through.
With no evidence to support that Charles left on his own accord, Freeman sets out to find him.
The first step is to get as close to where Charles was in his last known location. I was planning to go straight to his girlfriend Anna's house, which is where he was last seen and where the children last believed he was.
When our dad went missing, the last that we had heard was that he was with Anna, so suspicions definitely arose. The first time that he ever went back to her apartment was the last time he was seen alive.
The private investigator hired by the Butler family is on his way to interview the last person to see Charles alive, his girlfriend, Anna.
We went straight to Anna's apartment. We noticed a couple cameras that were located in the apartment building and on the exterior of the apartment building, but we didn't know who owned those cameras and whether they were operational. Anna appeared to be worried about what had happened to Charles, so she was more than happy to talk to us. She described the night that she spent with Charles as perfect. According to Anna, they were in love. So she was extremely concerned about what had happened to him and where he might have gone. No reason to think at that time that there was anything untoward.
But while interacting with Anna, something catches Freeman's eye.
When I entered the apartment, one of the first things I noticed in the hallway on a shelf was a man's watch. It didn't appear to be Charles Butler's watch.
Keith is struck by how flashy the watch is, which doesn't seem to fit Charles's laid-back style.
Keith kept me updated through the whole process, and he had asked her, and she said that it was her ex's watch.
Anna's ex is a 46-year-old Russian immigrant named Mikhail Chernayev.
I asked Anna about her ex-husband. They shared a child together, but they had been divorced for a long time, and Mikhail had been remarried, had another baby. Mikhail had 3 vehicles that he parked in the courtyard behind Anna's residence. So they still maintained enough of a relationship for him to be able to access the parking spaces and use them for his work and his personal cars.
After visiting Anna, Freeman reaches out to the NYPD detectives that offered Molly help. They inform him that they, too, have visited Anna's building. They've discovered that the security cameras there were installed by a resident, and they are working to identify the owner and secure the footage.
Keith kept kind of running into these things where he didn't have access to stuff, only the cops did. And since he wasn't a cop, he wasn't able to do some of the stuff. So we kind of had this like stop and go.
Then Molly gets a call from a friend of her father's in Florida.
She told me that a month before he went missing, Anna's ex-husband called my dad from Anna's phone and basically said, "She's my woman, stay away from her." It was just the one threatening call, and nobody really knew about it.
Based upon the fact that Charles had received what he believed was a threatening phone call from Anna's ex-husband, I was definitely suspicious that Mikhail was involved in Chuck's disappearance.
It's now 2 weeks since the Butlers have heard from their father, and the weight of the investigation is taking a toll.
I've heard people describe anxiety attacks, but I had never suffered from one up until this point. And it would just take me out. Like I would get like tunnel vision, I would hyperventilate, I'd be on my knees like crying. It was just literally like survival mode. The way I coped was with alcohol, and I completely numbed out. And had I not met my now husband after my dad went missing, like I truly believe I would be dead today.
Then, on October 4th, 16 days after Charles went missing, the NYPD gains access to the footage from Anna's building and share the material with Freeman. Does this footage contain clues about Charles Butler's final moments?
There was video footage of Charles and Anna entering the front entrance of the apartment complex at about 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. They went shopping, came back, couple just entering the building normally.
At about 7:30 a.m. the following morning, they spot something else.
We have video evidence of Anna on her cell phone outside the residence, and she finally had to go into work.
Freeman continues watching the footage from the rest of the day.
There is no video of Chuck ever leaving the apartment building after Charles and Anna had last entered her apartment. That was the last footage that we had of Charles.
We know he walked into her apartment. We know he is not seen walking out. What happened?
He just vanished the next day.
The footage does, however, reveal a potential clue.
One of the video cameras clearly showed Mikhail's car being parked in the early morning hours.
Hours later, after Anna leaves, the van pulls out.
He was watching the apartment and waiting for her to leave.
Moments later, a camera in the back of Anna's building reveals something else.
The video also captured Mikhail himself coming and going in the courtyard behind Anna's residence. We were able to see his work van leaving and returning on 2 occasions that morning.
While footage from behind the building is obscured, Mikhail's movements in the courtyard, combined with the fact that Charles never walked out the front door, lead investigators to a startling conclusion.
NYPD believed that Charles had met with foul play and that Mikhail assaulted Charles. And the last time that he left in that van, Charles' body was in the van. The NYPD was seeking search warrants on the vehicles specifically that were in the courtyard.
But days later, disaster strikes.
Once in a 100-year event swooped in. Superstorm Sandy struck.
The storm submerges 250,000 vehicles, including Chernayev's.
Sandy washed away a significant portion of any evidence that would have been necessary to connect Mikhail to Charles Butler's disappearance. It was devastating to the investigation.
when potential evidence linking Mikhail Chernayev to the murder of Charles Butler is destroyed in Superstorm Sandy. It's a crushing blow to the investigation.
Superstorm Sandy was devastating to New York and the people in New York. Makes it really challenging for the NYPD to be able to follow up on anything. They were at a standstill on the case for several months.
5 months into the investigation, Freeman knows the likelihood that Charles is alive is slim.
The words that Keith had used, it's like, your dad's not coming back. Like, he's officially, like, gone. I still can't tell you any answers, but we do know that he's gone.
In my teenage years, my dad and I would just kind of butt heads, I think. Like, we didn't always have the best relationship. I remember the last trip he made me get out of the car and give him a hug, which was very unusual because we didn't do that a lot. But we hugged and told each other we loved each other, and that was the last time I saw him.
Mikhail Chernayev is still the NYPD's lead suspect, but there's no evidence to charge him with murder.
NYPD cared about this case, but he was a missing person. They didn't have any evidence to really lead them to anything else.
There's not the physical evidence. There's not a pool of blood somewhere. There's no body.
In the face of a stalled investigation, Keith Freeman pitches an idea to the Butler children.
We decided to talk to the media in hopes of gaining additional information about what had happened to Charles.
The private investigator had gone, I think, as far as he could and asked if we'd be willing to take a look at this case.
If Charles did walk out of this apartment, where did he go? He didn't have a car in New York City. He would have either had to take a taxi or public transportation.
Where the trail for us goes cold is once he arrives at Anna's apartment. We needed to go see some of these places. We needed to try and get an interview with Anna since she was the last one to see him alive. She decides, yeah, she'd like to talk to us. Let's see if she'll shine some light on these last couple of hours.
And we loved each other, and we wanted to spend our life together.
Charles and Anna went to her apartment. The next morning, Anna says she gave Charles a key to the apartment and left for work. That would be the last time she or anyone else who knew Charles Butler would see him alive.
I gave him the key. He closed upper lock. So it means that he left.
Have you had the locks changed since this?
Since that, no.
Why not get your locks changed? But she hadn't. It hadn't even crossed her mind. Later on in the interview, I asked about when she got back, had he made the bed? And she couldn't remember. And just some of her reactions were, to me, there were some red flags that started to pop up. We knew Mikhail was a character within this larger story. When I asked about Mikhail, she seemed to dismiss the idea that Mikhail was somehow involved. She said, he's not behind this.
As Christopher Heath is reporting his story, another news organization reveals surprising information about Anna and Mikhail.
We found out that she basically started dating her ex again. That's when I really got suspicious. We didn't think that maybe she was involved in what happened, but she might have been involved in protecting Mikhail from getting caught.
Christopher Heath's report airs in late February of 2013.
The next day, we had a different response from the NYPD. We had the involvement of the state police. We had the involvement of senior detectives in Brooklyn and Manhattan.
With intrigue swirling around Anna, the NYPD turns to a specialist.
I'm Konstantin Papadopoulos, a detective with the New York City Police Department, assigned to investigate the Charles Butler missing persons case. We really wanted to know Was Anna involved in any way of Mr. Butler's disappearance, or if she had prior knowledge of it or any of that. We wanted Anna polygraphed.
Eight months after Charles Butler disappeared, an NYPD detective is interrogating his girlfriend, Anna.
I needed to find out if she had any prior knowledge of Mr. Butler's disappearance or if she had any involvement in his disappearance. So when I spoke to Anna, her demeanor was very cooperative. Anna told me she wanted to find out what happened to him as well. I asked about her ex-husband, Mikhail. She met Mikhail in Russia. They also have a son in common, but they did have their differences. According to Anna, he was a very jealous person, questioned her a lot about different things, even though they were not together. He was still jealous. During my course of the interview with Anna, she didn't believe Mikhail had something to do with his disappearance, but you don't know what's going on in someone's head, you know? At the end of the polygraph, she came up, no deception indicated. She had no involvement in Charles Butler's disappearance, so she was in the dark.
With no additional insight or evidence, the investigation is at a standstill. But the following day, the NYPD gets an unexpected call from officials in upstate New York.
There was a fisherman whose boat had broken down in an infrequently traveled area. The fisherman got out of his boat near the shoreline and stumbled upon a body.
When the body was found upstate New York, that DNA was matched with the DNA that the case detective submitted. Then they could ultimately say, yes, this is Charles Butler that was found by the lost fisherman.
After 8 months, Charles Butler has been found.
Like, I remember getting the phone call. I was still in New York. It was more like brutal and gory than we could have ever imagined. I had to not only take the information in for myself, but then immediately turn around and tell my brother and sister. I don't know. Looking back, it kind of feels like that was almost like, I don't know if the right word is relief. I remember it was a really heavy night of drinking for me, that's all I know. That really sucks.
For investigators, the discovery of the body is the first piece of solid evidence in the case.
Charles is found under suspicious circumstances. So now the investigation is going to change. So at this point, the detective calls me up and asks if I could polygraph Mikhail. He voluntarily came, yes. He was very cooperative. He seemed enthusiastic to help. He's a middle-aged man, a medium to large build, brown hair, balding a little bit.
Without revealing that Charles's body has been found, Papadopoulos begins his routine.
Whenever you interrogate somebody that's suspected of a crime, it's a long process. First off, with Mikhail, I built some rapport with him. We sat down, we spoke about common things, you know, what he did for a living, where is he from in Russia, when did he come to the United States, you know, questions like that. Just try to build rapport and see where his mindset's at for the polygraph later on. I asked Mikhail the regular questions that any investigator would ask him. Do you know him? Have you ever met him? Mikhail denied that he knew Charles. He explained to me that he knew that Anna was dating somebody, but he didn't know who it was.
Then Papadopoulos suddenly produces a document, a map of the exact area where Charles's body was found.
The demeanor that he had quickly changed. He was very nervous. At this point, everything came crashing around Mikhail.
When confronted with a map of the location where Charles Butler's body was discovered, lead suspect Mikhail Chernayev begins changing his story.
I'm sure Mikhail thought in his mind that, okay, as long as they don't find Mr. Butler, I'm gonna be okay. But Mr. Butler was found, and then everything came crashing around Mikhail.
Before the polygraph begins, Mikhail begins speaking freely about Charles and Anna.
Upon questioning by the NYPD, he confessed that he was in love with Anna, and he was jealous over anybody having a relationship with her, that in his mind, he went to the apartment to confront Charles about the relationship.
Mikhail said he walked over to Anna's place. After he observed her leaving for work, approximately 7:30 a.m., he knew that Charles would be home, knocked on the door, a confrontation ensued.
According to Mikhail, he pushed his way into the apartment. Charles screamed at him. Mikhail asked him to be quiet. When he didn't, Mikhail punched him in the face and knocked him down. He said that Charles still would not stop screaming. Mikhail took a knife from the kitchen counter, stabbed Charles, and suffocated him. Mikhail's explanation was that he was possessed by a demon.
We never got to the polygraph examination because during the pretest interview, Mikhail confessed to Mr. Butler's demise. Mikhail told me that he didn't want Anna to find out that he had any involvement in this. So he took Charles Butler's body to a location upstate where he used to go on vacation, a secluded area. And that's where he dumped Charles Butler's body. Charles Butler's final moments, that's not a good way to go.
Papadopoulos then questions Mikhail about the bizarre messages that were sent to Anna and the Butler children after Charles was dead.
Charles Butler's cell phone had a lock feature on it. So I asked Mikhail, I go, how did you use Mr. Butler's cell phone? Because you were texting people. Mikhail clearly said it was easy. I just took the SIM card out and put it in my phone, and I was able to use the phone. So I asked him, well, why did you do this to Mikhail? And he said to trick everybody.
Mikhail is arrested for the murder of Charles Butler. The following day, investigators go in search of additional evidence to bolster their case.
The NYPD fluoroceled looking for blood samples, and were able to find a very small drop of blood in the kitchen that matched Charles Butler.
Chernayev is indicted on charges of second-degree murder. Months later, he recants his confession and the case moves to trial. And again, the woman at the center of the deadly love triangle becomes an object of curiosity.
She got asked to testify for both sides. You could tell, like, she was in a really weird position. I watched her face when they showed his confession video, and it was the first time she ever heard it. Like, it dawned on her. It took a year and a half for her to even connect it in her own mind that he was the one that killed my dad. Like, he did it. And what he was telling her at the time was that he was in jail in place of her. He told her that they were trying to arrest her for killing my dad, and he's taking the blame for her. I feel like she was innocent in it. I feel like she was innocent almost to a fault, but that she was tricked by him too.
On September 29th, 2016, almost 4 years from when Charles was killed, there is a verdict.
A jury comes back and finds him guilty of murder. The judge handed down a sentence of 25 years to life.
With the trials behind us, I felt like we were finally able to create our own closure, if you will. The grieving process is something I still struggle with. I'm grateful for the time that we did have together because he raised me to be the man I am today.
Monday night, we had that really awesome conversation. I think that trip, he was the most excited I had ever seen. And I think part of it was because, of course, he's coming back to the city that he loves.
Saturday afternoon in the city, street festival. How do you like this neighborhood, huh?
And he was going to see the woman that he fell in love with and get ready for a really epic weekend in New York.
The last time that he had texted me, I was supposed to go get air in my tires. He had texted me like, make sure you get air in your tires. My dad was my best friend, and any question that I ever asked was never off the table. What you couldn't see in yourself, like my dad could see it in you. He was our best friend. Like he was my closest friend. The bond was there.
That was basically my home. My parents had all the knickknacks from like games to movies. It was basically a playground. I absolutely loved it. I hear 4 loud shots.
Someone is a robber or a pumpkin.
Does he have a gun?
Yes, he's got my pants.
I remember it coming over the radio, kind of in disbelief. Michael got along with everybody. He was on the good side of everybody.
Between you and me, brother, they were crooked people.
He had a large sum of money. Really, anybody could have followed him and figured out where he was going to be and when.
Maybe everyone else in there was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
September 20th, 2013, Danville, Kentucky. As dawn breaks, Michael and Angie Hawkinsmith arrive at the pawn shop they manage, ABC Gold Games and more. Their baby daughter Naomi and 9-year-old son Andrew in tow.
The pawn shop, that was basically my home. We had all the knickknacks of a pawn shop, from like games to movies to all sorts of junk. It was basically a playground. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was simply amazing.
The Hawkinsmiths are always together, even on school days.
My mom was determined to educate me in a home setting.
When they first started to homeschool Andrew, they put homeschool in the middle of everything. So when Michael worked at the pawn shop, Angie would help him with things at the pawn shop. So Andrew would go in there, he would sit and study. He had his own little desk and everything. And they were always trying to spend time together.
The Hawkins-Smith family story starts a decade earlier, when Michael, working as a youth pastor in central Kentucky, meets a young woman as dedicated to her faith as he is.
He met Angie. And I think they got stuck together and they stayed that way. It's kind of like you didn't see one without the other.
Before long, Michael and Angie marry, and the family doubles in size.
Michael was on cloud 9. He just loved the idea that they would have a boy and a girl, and that their life would be complete.
My dad, he made things look so easy, and he was truly an amazing person. He would have a crowd of people, and he'd just be talking to somebody about something, and then he would just pick me up by the leg and throw me up in the air. And everybody'd be like, don't drop him. But he never dropped me. He always caught me by the leg and just put me down. My mom, of course, she was the pastor's wife. And so that's a big role to take. She was also a very sociable person, lovable person. She would always make friends with anyone and everyone.
He'd go preaching. Angie, she would sing. She constantly sang.
We went from church to church to church. It was simply amazing.
The family's journey eventually leads them to Danville, Kentucky in 2013.
They found a church here in Danville that they wanted to attend or get involved in. And when it comes to him in church, him being a parent, or anything he did, it was his whole heart or nothing.
Michael puts that same level of dedication into the part-time job he takes at a pawn shop to support the family while he preaches. Steve Devine, the owner of the pawn shop, quickly makes Michael a partner and lets him take over running the business.
He'd been working there for, maybe a year and a half before they opened the store that morning.
The morning of September 20th, 2013 starts out like any typical day. By 9 a.m., the pawn shop is open for business.
Once my dad got started, I did my own thing. I grabbed me a game system of some sort and started playing.
Within 15 minutes of opening, a regular customer enters the store.
The gold man, Dan Smith, came in.
Dan Smith, like Michael Hawkins-Smith, is a part-time pastor. He makes his money buying and selling gold at pawn shops and jewelry stores.
They was both at the desk conversating, dealing with money and whatnot.
Michael and Dan are haggling. Angie is rocking baby Naomi near the register. Andrew is testing out a video game. It's a routine morning. None of them are aware that these will be their final moments together.
Shortly after, this guy, he came in as well. And I was like, he's kind of weird looking. He starts to pull out a gun and kind of raises his voice a little bit and says, "Get on the ground." And we all did because we was petrified. Me, Mom, and my sister all huddled up to a corner.
Andrew hears strange, high-pitched sounds as he watches the unthinkable. A man shooting at his mother, father, and Dan.
For me, it sounded like a dart gun. Dad was like, please stop. So that happened, and he started rolling around until he wasn't. He stopped. But then Dan Smith was next, and then he was going to go after us. And my mom, she told me, like, to go in the back with my sister. So I do. I crawl all the way back to the office, and I sit my sister on the couch. I'm sitting right beside her. Of course, shaken up and don't even know what's going on. I hear 4 loud shots. And I remember crawling over to the doorway and seeing that my mom was just laying there with a puddle of blood, big puddle of blood. And so I picked up the phone and called on it.
911, where's your emergency?
Someone is a robber at a pawn shop.
Someone's robbing the pawn shop?
And my parents got shot.
Where is the robber?
He's right here right now.
Investigators catch haunting glimpses of a calculating killer.
We were starting to get these little clips of the silver minivan circling the area.
You can tell the van is kind of waiting. The way the whole crime played out, I think that it could be something professional.
And hear the voice of the man who may be responsible for a triple murder.
Oh, nobody, none of this, because what does it make me look like? It makes me look like the perpetrator, see?
My parents got shot.
Where is the robber?
He's right here right now.
9-year-old Andrew Hawkinsmith makes a desperate 911 call as he hides with his baby sister in the back of his family's pawn shop after an armed robber opened fire on his parents and their customer.
The robber, does he have a gun?
Yes. He shot my parents.
Okay, can he see you?
I'm in the back right now.
You're in the back? So the robber's up front of the store?
Yes, but I don't know if he's here or not. But come quickly.
Where are your parents?
Oh. They're dead on the ground. Come here quickly because I'm afraid. Please hurry.
Okay, they're coming, okay?
I was just sitting there with my sister and hoping to God that these police come.
Danville Police Detective A.J. Mullins is one of the first to respond.
I remember it coming over the radio, kind of in disbelief. Is that what I really heard? And it's what everybody just dropped whatever we were doing. We got down there.
It takes police less than 6 minutes to arrive at the pawn shop.
They came very quickly, and I had walked to the door with phone in hand and sister in the other, and walking by these dead bodies of people that I loved. I was petrified. I didn't know what I was looking at. And out I walk with my sister.
When I arrived at the parking lot of the pawn shop up front, our captain at the time had come to my window and said, "We need you to get these kids out of here as soon as possible. We've got bodies inside." and they put them in my vehicle, and Andrew held Naomi on the way there to the police department.
At Danville PD, we actually only have 4 full-time detectives, and we take anything from a theft to a murder. So it was a huge case, so we needed all hands on deck.
I don't care how many times you've done it or seen it, there's nothing that truly prepares you for this.
After taking the Hawkinsmith children safely away from the crime scene, Detective Mullins rushes back to the pawn shop to join the investigation.
When you first walk into the door, there's a counter, glass counter. Angela's body was kind of in the corner near the register. And Michael was on the other side, where it looked like had been gold, some jewelry kind of laid out as if he was the one speaking to Dan at the time all this went down. And Dan, you could tell where Dan fell initially, and then someone had drug him back where it would be harder to see him.
You could see clearly the drag marks of blood leading in that direction.
And his briefcase was open on top of one of the tables.
Of course, we see tons of shell casings, but they, of course, also have a lot of guns that they're trying to sell that are within the pawn shop, ammunition that they're selling. So it really adds to the whole chaos of everything and not knowing at that point when you initially walk in what's going to be evidence.
When we go through the store, we're having to step around the blood, the shell casings, because we didn't want to step on anything like that. We had never seen anything like this.
There was so much evidence to collect and to process and to go through.
The victims had been shot multiple times, possibly after they were down. The only thing at that time that we could determine was that the spent casings appeared to be from a .22 caliber weapon.
An autopsy will later determine that Michael was shot 8 times in the legs, chest, and head. Angie was shot 3 times in the head. Dan was shot 5 times in the head.
Initially, you're thinking, okay, it's some kind of a robbery. We look at the register. There was still cash in the register.
One would speculate that the register would have been gone through for whatever money it had. So it did not appear that the motive was to rob the actual pawn shop. So that was definitely a red flag.
Obviously, as a police officer, we tried to do the best we could to get it solved as quickly as we could.
We're like, okay, what's going on? Is this more of a personal type issue going on? We're like, what do we have here? Is this something that it was a hit? Was it on Dan Smith? Was it for the Hawkinsmith? Was it all of them?
Police in Danville, Kentucky, investigating a triple murder, need to talk to their only eyewitness, 9-year-old Andrew Hawkinsmith. The frightened child and his baby sister Naomi have been taken to the police station while officers try to locate their next of kin.
They had sat me down and was like, do you have anyone that we could contact so that way they can take you home? And I was like, I don't know, because I didn't know phone numbers. I remember being very shooken up because I was like, where am I gonna go?
And I went back to the police station and interviewed Andrew. Andrew was able to give us a good description of the bad guy.
He looked like a heavy-set dude and like a beard that didn't really look like an authentic beard.
He said, you know how at Halloween when people wear fake beards, there's little tabs?
And he had sunglasses and a cap.
And the suspect, he wore black latex gloves and camouflage coat.
Andrew also provides crucial details about the weapons used in the attack.
Andrew went in the back office, and as he's running, he could hear shots being fired. And he says they sounded different.
I remember him making a sound like...
And one of our officers got his silencer, and we showed it to Andrew, and it said, "Did it look like this?" And he said, "Yes, that's exactly what it was."
The use of a silencer raises frightening concerns for detectives.
The way that just the whole crime played out, I think that it definitely could be a possibility, that it could be something professional.
As detectives consider whether they are hunting for a professional hitman, word of the shooting reaches Michael Hawkinsmith's mother at her home across town. She rushes to the pawn shop.
When I got there, I knew it was not good. I got out of the car and some of the officers met me halfway up the alley. And I said, "I want to see my son." "You can't. You need to go to the police station and see your grandbabies." There's nothing no worse in this world than to lose a child. But if it hadn't been for Andrew and Naomi, I don't think I would have survived it.
Police locate the family of the third victim, Dan Smith, and break the awful news to them that same day.
I was in college, and I get this call from my stepmom, and I could tell from her voice that something was going on. And I couldn't believe what she was saying, and said, "What? Like, what?" And I just froze. I just couldn't believe he was gone.
I just couldn't understand, what I was being told. I just couldn't comprehend.
He was such a giver, financially a giver. He was a giver of his time, his energy, his kind words.
As the victims' families try to cope with the devastating news, investigators back at the crime scene are continuing to dig for clues. They canvass the area around the pawn shop and find a promising lead.
We found a witness. He saw a heavy-set, tall, white male coming out of the pawn shop. Described him as having a beard, and he went around to the little alleyway, and there was a van that pulled out of the alleyway and turned right.
The description given was a silver minivan.
The pawn shop doesn't have a security camera, but many other businesses in the area do.
So we reviewed camera footage in the area, and we actually spotted a silver van matching that exact description passed by where the pawn shop's located. We are able to track the silver van basically through town with that video. You can just catch it, drive right by, and it matches the description perfect, right? And then right after that, we see a sliver of it pass there. So you can tell the van is circling this area and kind of waiting.
The detectives cannot make out the van's license plates, but the footage convinces them that the unidentified driver was staking out the pawn shop, or someone inside. Investigators focus on who might have been the target and why.
Well, we started looking at the Hawkinsmiths, who they might have had dealings with.
Of course, you find that they're just a loving, good family. no criminal history and no reason for anybody to want to harm the Hawkinsmiths.
Detectives also take a closer look at the Hawkinsmiths' business.
Steve Devine was a co-owner of the actual pawn shop in partnership with the Hawkinsmiths.
So we go and talk to him, and turns out he was actually supposed to be there that day.
The detectives learned that Steve Devine knew the Hawkinsmiths were scheduled to do a gold deal with Dan Smith that morning.
He said, but he woke up because of something with his allergies. And he called him and he told him that he wasn't going to make the meeting. So we're like, well, you know, that's what we call a flag.
The detectives must now consider whether Steve Devine purposely avoided the pawn shop that morning because he knew what was going to happen.
It was definitely concerning that the owner of the business, who was supposed to be there, ironically just didn't show up because of allergies.
Detectives investigating a triple murder in Danville, Kentucky are looking into Steve Devine, the business partner of victim Michael Hawkinsmith.
He was supposed to be there and wasn't. And so we're like, you know, what's going on here?
Steve tells police he was sick and with his wife all morning.
We were checking him out and confirm that he's telling us the truth.
His alibi clears him, but their interview with Steve provides detectives with a new direction for the investigation.
He was able to fill the little holes as to what was going on in the pawn shop.
Dan Smith was a gold buyer. So he carries a briefcase with him with a large amount of cash.
Dan Smith's wife was able to tell us that he would do a certain route on certain days of the week. So he goes to his bank, he gets the money, and then he had a lot of pawn shops that he went to.
He'd have anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000, and he went to known businesses on known days. So really anybody could have followed him and figured out where he was going to be and when.
We're thinking maybe he was the actual target, and everyone else in there was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Investigators visit the other pawn shops where Dan did business and ask to see footage from their security cameras.
And then once we started following Dan Smith, we were able to say, you know, boom, he was here at this time on this date, like clockwork.
So this is Dan Smith. This is a pawn shop in Lexington he goes to.
You're trying to look for anything, any odd vehicles that may be following, anyone within the store that may be paying him any particular attention, anything like that.
As they review the tapes, detectives find video from the last pawn shop Dan Smith visited before heading to the Hawkinsmiths.
This is where Dan Smith arrives at Lawson's Jewelers in Harrodsburg, Kentucky. Be around 8, quarter after 8, 8:20.
He walks in with that same briefcase and then talks to the lady behind the counter and just appears very relaxed, laughing, has no idea, obviously, where he's headed. I don't even think it was a full hour after this. Dan Smith was killed.
It's kind of odd when you're watching this. This is the guy's, last moments. He doesn't know it. Nobody knows what's getting ready to happen except for one person.
Investigators scour the footage for any indication of who that one person might be.
There was nobody that appeared to be paying any particular attention to him. Mind you, the video was pretty narrowly focused coming out of the one store, so we couldn't see his full motions once he crossed the street. But reviewing that video at the time, there was nothing that stood out.
We really were kind of baffled at this point. Who was even the target?
4 days into the investigation, there's no clear target, no clear motive, and nothing pointing to the identity of the gunman described by 9-year-old Andrew Hawkinsmith.
We were getting ready to figure out what our next step was, and this phone call came in to the police department from Michigan. And we're like, Michigan, now what do we have here?
The caller from Michigan identifies himself as a pastor. He tells police about someone in the Kentucky area who knew the victims and has been making suspicious comments.
The pastor from Michigan relayed that he was friends with an individual by the name of Kenneth Allen Keith, and that he had communicated with Kenneth Allen Keith and got on the subject about the murders in Danville.
The pastor explained that Kenneth Allen Keith knew the Hawkinsmiths, and that Kenneth Allen said, talking about the Hawkinsmiths, that they're not innocent either.
This pastor had said Mr. Keith just switched like a light switch, that something set him off, and he said that they had cost him a lot of money.
And so I think that statement alone really stood out to him, because, you look at they are innocent people, right? He's concerned that potentially his friend, Kenneth Allen Keith, could be involved in this triple homicide. The call was what kind of turned the whole investigation around, when we realized that it could be the Hawkinsmiths that were actually targeted.
Four days after the murders of Michael and Angie Hawkinsmith and Dan Smith, police learned that a man named Kenneth Allen Keith has been making suspicious comments about the Hawkinsmiths.
Once Kenneth Allen's name was mentioned, we started looking, okay, who is this guy?
He was involved in the pawn shop business. He had one in Somerset, Kentucky. And he was a pastor of a small town church in Pulaski County, Kentucky. He appeared to be loved by his local congregation.
That was kind of a common denominator for everybody involved, as they were all heavily into the church, either as pastors, ministers, leaders, just in a church.
But the investigators quickly discover that Kenneth Allen Keith appears to have a different style of preaching than the other pastors.
We found one of his sermons that he had on YouTube where he's on the pulpit and he's got a rifle with a sling on. And he's talking about his past, what he's done. And we're like, okay, we have a sniper here. And the further that we looked into Kenneth Allen, the more we're like, oh, this is a good lead.
So when we start looking into Kenneth Allen Keith, we look into his financial history. And we learned that he had recently been sued by Steve Devine. And so he owed Steve Devine money.
Police learned that Steve Devine, the co-owner of the pawn shop with Michael and Angie, had been in business with Kenneth Allen Keith before putting the Hawkinsmiths in charge 4 months earlier. Prior to that, the Hawkinsmiths had actually been Kenneth Allen Keith's employees.
Kenneth felt cheated. He felt that that pawn shop should have been his. And that Steve Devine and the Hawkinsmiths, basically stole it right out underneath his feet.
So we felt that would be a good motive. That would make someone upset. Upset enough to kill someone? We didn't really know the personality or what was really within Kenneth Allen Keith at that time.
But as they dig deeper into Kenneth Allen Keith, detectives uncover what could be another crucial link between him and the murders.
It ended up that there was a silver/gray minivan that was registered and associated with him.
The same kind of vehicle seen on surveillance video speeding away from the crime scene. While all of the evidence is starting to align around Kenneth Allen Keith, investigators know everything they have is only circumstantial. To help them build a more solid case, they reach out to the pastor in Michigan who initially tipped them off to Kenneth and recruit him to help their investigation.
At this point, we want a step further, so arrangements are made to actually record phone calls.
On October 9th, 2013, the Michigan pastor calls Kenneth Allen Keith while the police listen in to see if he says anything incriminating.
When somebody's being murdered in such a heinous way as what this was, you want to make them, out to be saints. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But between you and me, brother, they were crooked people.
Is that right?
They went into it with the whole point from day one to take over that business from me. I don't mean to speak ill.
No, hey, man.
Facts are facts.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I can't tell nobody none of this because what does it make me look like?
Yeah.
It makes me look like the perpetrator, see?
And during that phone call, he was able to kind of go over what he was doing that day, what his location was, how he wasn't involved.
I was in Danville, but I was at the pharmacy. I'm standing in the pharmacy while all this happened.
We took that information and looked at the video surveillance, and we found that moments after the 911 call, Kenneth Allen Keith was entering the pharmacy in Danville. The timestamps from video gave us the indications on when it occurred, and from the pawn shop to the pharmacy, that was a doable time.
He was actually here at a local pharmacy just within minutes of the time of the murder, which we thought was unusual, to travel basically an hour to pick up a prescription when you have local pharmacies in your local community.
The detectives have no doubt. They are watching Kenneth Allen Keith just moments after committing a triple homicide.
Watching him and knowing that he had just killed 3 people, it's hard to fathom how somebody can just, take somebody's life and then act like it was nothing.
10 days after the murders, police believe they finally have enough to arrest Kenneth Allen Keith. Now, they need to track him down.
We tracked his phone and we were able to actually see that he had went to Florida.
And when we knew he was on his way back, we were setting up our game plan, what we were going to do, that we were going to have a search warrant at the church, a search warrant at the home where he lived with his family, and a search warrant at the pawn shop in Somerset, Kentucky. And that's when we make our move.
October 9th, 2013. Danville, Kentucky police are waiting as Kenneth Allen Keith the prime suspect in the murder of Michael and Angie Hockensmith and Dan Smith, returns home from a trip to Florida.
He gets up the next morning from coming home and he goes to his pawn shop. And that's when we make our move. An investigator went in as a potential customer and made contact with Mr. Allen. We didn't go in with guns drawn, anything like that, because pawn shops have guns in them and we don't know where what is. And he came out from his office area and they were able to basically tell him, we've got a search warrant for your pawn shop.
As police search his business, Kenneth Allen Keith is placed under arrest.
During the search of the pawn shop, we discovered a box for a threaded device that can be purchased over the internet that can be fashioned into a makeshift silencer.
The discovery confirms detectives' suspicions that a silencer was used in the killings and explains Andrew Hockensmith's description of a high-pitched sound as his parents were shot.
And then also outside of the business, we found spent .22 shell casings and then a target that had been shot. So we believe that he was practicing prior to the shooting.
The .22 casings found in Kenneth Keith's pawn shop matched all the expended shell casings from the murder scene in Danville, Kentucky. They were shot from the identical weapon.
There was evidence, obviously, that tied him to this case to make it a strong case.
Detectives confront Kenneth Allen Keith with the overwhelming evidence.
We are always trying to get an outright confession, but that did not happen.
We got the opinion that Mr. Allen thought that he was just so intelligent that he was going to beat all this, but he didn't know what we had found.
News of the arrest shocks Dan Smith's family. They know Kenneth Allen Keith and believed he was a good pastor and a friend.
Dad had a previous relationship with Kenneth Allen Keith. He would come in and he would buy and sell. They did business. You're going, wait a minute. That's not a real pastor. But to be able to commit murders on Friday and then get up on the pulpit Sunday morning and preach, especially in front of 2 children.
For Andrew Hockensmith, who hid for his life with his baby sister during the murders of his parents, the news comes as a relief.
I remember they was like, hey, Andrew, look at this, look at the news. And they showed me the newscast where they finally caught him. I was like, all right.
Prosecutor Richie Bottoms believes he has all he needs to convict Kenneth Allen Keith on 3 counts of first-degree homicide.
I think the evidence spoke for itself. We felt very confident that we could convince the jury that he did this.
After initially announcing they would seek the death penalty, prosecutors decide to spare Andrew and his baby sister Naomi and Dan Smith's family the pain of a long trial. Instead, they offer Kenneth Allen Keith life without parole in exchange for a guilty plea.
We all come out on the short end of the stick, but that's okay. I don't have to answer for what he did. The man's going to have his own demons he's going to have to live with.
I want people to remember who our dad was. I want him to be remembered by the good things that he did for people. He was a very kind man, and he wanted to help. He wanted to help people, and he did.
I've been told you're a spitting image of your dad, and you look just like him, you act just like him, And my mom, I think Naomi, she looks just like my mom. I'm very thankful for what I have. And in a sense, it's like I am like living through my parents' life, or kind of like a reimagined one. My parents will
बेकदरां नाल प्यार वदा के बेकदरां नाल प्यार वदा के दुख वे उठाया पारा दिल भी टुटिया आस भी मुकी जहाँ बेकदरा यारा दिल भी टुटिया आस भी मुकी जहाँ बेकदरा यारा असला संग जने की करिए असला संग जने की वे करिए नस्ला तक नहीं भूल दे बेनस्ला संग ने की करिए उल्टियां चाला चल दे बेनस्ला संग ने की वे करिए उल्टियां चाला चल दे पालन सौखे होंदे ओके पालन मापे पिछली उमरी इस नुक्ते दी समझ आ जांदी आपे पिछली उमरी इस नुक्ते दी समझ आ जांदी आपे बहुते यार बनावण वाले बहुते यार बनावण वाले रह जाते ने कल्ले असा ते लुक लुक रोंदे वेखे पकड़े आना पल्ले असा ते ओ लुक लुक रोंदे वेखे पकड़े आना पल्ले गई ओ जवानी आया मैं बुढ़ापा जाग पईया सब पीड़ा हुण किस कम मुहम्मद बख्शा सौंफ जवैण हरीड़ा हुण किस कम मुहम्मद बख्शा सौंफ जवैण हरीड़ा खबर नी माड़ी आवाज़ां देंदिया मेरे आमज़माना देप तलाई मिटी दिए पत्थरां दा विसराना देप तलाई मिटी दिए पत्थरां दा विसराना पर कूका मिटिया पांदे पत नहीं पांदे फेरा पढ़ दरूद करावल जादे पत नहीं पांदे फेरा हिजर तेरा जे पानी मंगे, हिजर तेरा जे पानी मंगे, खून ना दे गेना। दिल करदा तेनू कोल बिठा के दर्द पुराने छेड़ा। दिल करदा तेनू कोल बिठा के दर्द पुराने छेड़ा। खात होया नू दूजी वारी, तोड़ के जिंदा कर सी बिच मैदान कयामत वाले। हर कोई लेखा पर सी बिच मैदान कयामत वाले। हर कोई लेखा पर सी। चंगी मंदी सजना कोलो, सैवारी हो जांदी। यार यारां दा गिला नहीं कर दे, असल परीत जिना दी। यार यारां दा गिला नहीं कर दे, असल परीत जिना दी। ले हुण यार अवाले रब दे देवे इजाजत राया। दिल दी नगरी खाली हो गई, कंड कीती जद पाया। दिल दी नगरी वे खाली हो गई, कंड कीती जद पाया। कंड कीती जद पाया, कंड कीती जद पाया। बेकदरा नल प्यार वदा के, बेकदरा नल प्यार वदा के, दुख वे उठाया पारा। दिल भी टुटिया आस भी मूकी, जहाँ बेकदरा यारा। दिल भी टुटिया आस भी मूकी, जहाँ बेकदरा यारा।